guys, Rourke here, welcome back to the bench. Today we're going to be doing some work to the Glock 43. For those who don't know, the Glock 43 is a slim frame Glock pistol coming with a single stack 6-round magazine in 9mm. Now the work that we're going to be doing, we're going to be putting in the Action Enhanced Trigger Kit from Apex. This kit includes a flat face trigger, a new trigger bar, and a new connector. First up, let's get some baselines on our stock Glock 43 trigger. Making sure the firearm is free and clear, I'm going to go ahead and grab my trigger pull gauge, make sure it gets the dingus pulled back. And our stock trigger pull is a little over 6 pounds. To give you an idea of the stock trigger pull of a 43, you've got about a 1/4 inch of take up, and then you've got a lot of Glock slop in there. And at the end of the Glock slop is that a little over 6 pound break. The trigger shape itself is Glock's kind of stair-step shape with the dingus in the middle, and on the Glock 43 especially, I've noticed that you can really feel that dingus. Maybe it's just because of the slim frame and it hits your finger a little bit differently because your hand's not on it quite the same way, but I can feel that dingus a lot more on the 43 than I can on my 19. So the trigger pull on this isn't terrible, but it does have a lot of that Glock slop, and I really don't like the feel of the trigger itself. With that being said, let's go ahead and get this thing out of here and put in that Apex kit. First thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and field strip it. Again, we did make sure this didn't have any ammo in it. We're going to pull the trigger, pull back slightly on the slide, pull down on our takedown pins, and push the slide forward and off the gun, just like every other Glock. Set the slide to the side. Now we're going to go ahead and pop out our pins. We've got 2 pins on here that we got to take out. We've got the trigger pin up here, and we've got the rear frame pin back here. We're going to push all of these through from the left side to the right side, and then we're going to put them back in the other way. Let's go ahead and grab our punch and push out the first pin. Now, as with all Glocks, these pins come out very easily. That is one of my favorite things about Glocks, is how easy they are to take down. Now on this front pin, we are going to have to push it through while at the same time wiggling our slide release around a little bit. That slide release is what is retaining that pin, so as I press on our pin, I'm going to take the slide release, just kind of wiggle it around just a little bit, and once you wiggle it enough, that pin will come right out. Now the reason that you wiggle it, and the reason that that works, is because that's actually grabbing right here on this retention groove. So wiggling around is what releases it from that retention groove. Now that wrists are, we can go ahead and grab our punch again and pry up on our locking block right here. And that should just slide it right out the top. Once it's there, we can grab it, just pull it right out. Let's set that aside, and now we can go ahead and pull the back frame insert out by grabbing a hold of our ejector and just pulling out. And on these, the slide stop actually sits right on top of the trigger, right about like this, and so it's going to come out too. So let's go ahead and just sit that back in the frame. We'll set the frame aside, and now we're just going to work on our trigger here. So first things first, let's go ahead and grit our trigger bar off. Now, Glock did make some changes to the trigger bars here. The trigger spring is no longer grabbing onto our trigger bar. It's actually hooked into a little slot back here. So as we hinge our trigger bar out this way, it's going to go ahead and release from both its guide groove back here and that little lip, and the trigger bar is just going to come right off like that. So I'm going to go ahead and set the trigger bar aside. Now we've got our connector here that we need to get off. I typically grab something along the lines of a flathead screwdriver for that, just one of these little teeny tiny ones, and go ahead and get it under there and pry it up. Now, I generally try to stay as close to this front part as I can when I'm pulling these out, because the angle right here, this angle right here, actually dictates how this bar functions. So I don't want to grab it way back here and actually bend that, because I want to maintain as much integrity with this stock trigger as I can, just in case I ever have to go back to it. So let's go ahead and set that aside. Let's go ahead and grab our Apex kit, pop it open, and put in some parts. I'm going to set the trigger bar aside for now, go ahead and grab our connector, and then we're going to go ahead and get our connector right back on here. It's going to go in the same way. You're going to put it right in that slot and just push. Now that connector is in, we need to go ahead and get our trigger bar and our trigger and get it on there as well. It's not quite the reverse order like it used to be. So what I want to do here is I want to get this leading surface of our trigger bar. I'm going to sit it right into this little cup right here. Once I've got it in that little cup, I'm going to pull it forward and try to hinge it down into this groove and seat it. So here's kind of what that looks like. Trigger bar down in that little lip, pull it forward, and there we go. And that is the installed trigger bar. Now let's go ahead and put this back in the frame. So let's grab our frame, let's go ahead and slide our components back in, starting with the rear, get the trigger down in where it's supposed to be, and then let's slide our rear frame insert down and into the firearm. And with our trigger down in there now, we can go ahead and grab our slide release and sit it right back down in there as well. And with the slide stop back in, we can go ahead and put our front frame insert back in. So with that all back together, we can go ahead and put our pins back in. Let's start with our trigger pin. We're going to toss that in again from right to left from the front. And as we push in, we're going to hit a little bit of tension. And once we hit that tension, we're going to have to wiggle our slide release around again. Too far. Alright, and you can actually hear it click into that little groove when you're installing it. Okay, with that front one in, now we can go ahead and do our back one. Again, we're going to be going from right to left. Go ahead and sit it in there. Punch it through. Don't push too hard because it does go in pretty easily and you want it relatively centered in there. And now our new trigger is in. Let's go ahead and toss our slide on and see what we got. So the overall trigger profile has stayed pretty much the same. We've got about a little less than a 1/4 inch of take up. I'd say about 3/16 of take up. So we didn't take a whole lot out. We still hit that wall, get a little bit of Glock slop. It's less Glock slop though. And finally you've got the brake. The brake comes in at a very nice vertical brake. That's the biggest thing that I've noticed so far, that trigger shape. There you go. It's braking nice and vertical now, and it doesn't go a whole lot past that. The trigger shape, again, we no longer have the nasty stair-step trigger shape that you get on the Glocks. It is a very nice flat face. The dingus actually comes back flush with the rest of the face, so it is a true flat face trigger. You don't get that little bit of dingus nub out the front of it that you usually get. It's got a nice little hook on here at the bottom. I will say that this trigger feels significantly nicer now. Let's go ahead and grab the trigger pull gauge. I don't think we changed the weight a whole lot. It maybe dropped a pound or so. So let me get the gauge on here. Calibrated finger wins again. A little over 5 pounds. So we dropped about a pound off our trigger pull. We didn't change the profile a whole lot, which is fine because I kind of like the Glock profile of a little bit of take up, hard wall, and then brake. It did stiffen up the Glock slop a little bit, but the biggest thing that we've noticed here so far is that trigger shape. It's a significantly more comfortable trigger shape. I think this trigger shape is going to lend itself to a lot more shootability. Now, on something like the 43, not that big of a deal. The 43 isn't a range gun. This is a gun that you're only going to really use in self-defense situations. However, the 48 is a viable range gun, a gun that people can buy for both self-defense and to take to the range and have a little bit of fun with. And this trigger will work on that. It'll work on the 43, it'll work on the 48, and it'll work on the 43X. So that's it, guys. That's the installation of our action enhancement kit for slim frame Glock pistols from Apex Tactical. I want to thank Apex because Apex actually did send this trigger to me to get this information to you, my viewers. So thanks Apex, and thanks to all of you guys. Remember, if you found this video useful, go ahead and like and subscribe down below. Shoot us some messages in the comments to let us know what other triggers you'd like to see on some of the slim frame Glocks. If you like what we do here on the channel, you'd want to help out a little bit, head over to our Patreon page at patreon.com/workthetrigger, where we give you weekly updates. Remember guys, I appreciate every one of you, and until next time, do your research, get informed, and get to work.